Hello humans, for that second special episode of the Red Pigeon, even if this is the very first I'm doing in English, because I think it brings up a conversation worth having outside my tiny audience. It is about the Starmap. No, I am not going to speculate on what the 3.0 version is going to look like. I'm going to draft what I would like to see in there and why, even if chances are it will never be there. First off, because I find astronomy fascinating, like I did nothing to suggest that in any way since I'm talking about Warframe.
Enfin non, pas sur Uranus, sur un de ses satellites, parce qu'Uranus, elle est là. Uranus, c'est une boule de gaz.
And because I think it could create some interesting elements, and perhaps even do things that are not tied to one planet or another. And just so you know, from now on, possible post-Second Dream spoilers are going to slip in my videos. I'll warn you at the tag-along. For this particular video, it will be limited to the name of a faction and the nature of the Orakin towers revealed in Update 18. For starters, we are going to look into another game, which had nothing to do with Warframe. Nexus. Because it has the basics of what I would like to see in Warframe's Starmap. Its chart is a solar system on scale. In Warframe's context, that would allow to fix a few absurdities of the present Starmap. Invert Mars in Phobos, for instance, if only because Phobos is a 20-kilometer piece of rock which skyline is completely barred by Mars itself. Put Sirius between Mars and Jupiter, in the inner belt where it belongs, and take Europa in its orbit around the giant with the red eye. And even if Eris is not the furthest object of the solar system on the map, it would be the wildest one around the ecliptic plane, making the infested ship orbiting it the vanguard of what lies beyond the worlds of the origin system. And for those who don't know, the ecliptic plane is a plane in which the Earth orbits. It would also allow to get a basic idea of the relative sizes of the worlds and, more importantly, of the distances that set them apart. Sedna, in that regard, would be the end of the worlds, putting Pluto back in its place of next-door neighbor. So that's all shiny and pretty, but what would be that for? Well, just like that, without even thinking about it, to teach what our own solar system looks like. It's not like we are living in it and all that stuff is wandering around above our blue skyline, but yes, it does. And because there are not that many things that allow for free-roaming view of our home system, be it for relative sizes or distances. Maybe even, let's dream a little, put the apparent size of the sun back into the equation. Then like this, it looks like nothing, but having a big-ass fireball in the sky that shadows the stars away around Mercury and a tiny cold light around Pluto, that sets a pretty big difference in tone. Seriously, the tileset we have for Pluto right now could be in the Alps. I know it's a placeholder, but still. Then, about what it brings to Warframe as a game. It would allow to make worlds appear and disappear very easily, which might come in handy when all current worlds will have their specific tilesets. To add Io's volcanoes with their plumes hundreds of kilometers wide, and the hydrocarbon oceans on Titan. Sargas Rock is supposed to be the Orakin artifact hunter of the Grenier. I like to see him in action, don't you? I know. First, the only real female boss of the game. And billions of kilometers from there, maybe, set a foot on Eris and the horrors that lurk there. We could have pieces of storylines that destroy entire moons in the neighborhood of the outer planets. For instance, when the sentience will be more than reanimated bones from a ghost of the last war of the Orakin. On a broader scale, instead of popping on top of existing nodes, sometimes in a Gallimore-frilly fashion, translating this what worth it on this word alone, invasions and infestations could be fleets of ships approaching a target. The time they need to arrive would be the cooldown of the mission. Or we could set fleets of ships having a cup of tea with cannons and boarding parties, or orbiting a planet, be it for defense or offense. This kind of presentation would allow for all this jumble to look and feel much more alive, more dynamic. Sets of missions where we would need to locate ships first, then taking the Galatine-type hugs would make much more sense, considering we would stop to neglect 99% of the space where planets orbit. And, in due time, that would allow for new guests in the dance, like some freaking comets, secret Orakin fortresses into comets or Corpus Lab. With such a presentation of the star map, to add anything would be much more simple. And the icing on the cake? This is not incompatible with what DE told us they were doing with the star map. Even in last Friday's dev stream, until now, they have said that they wanted a more conventional way to navigate across the worlds, instead of the radial tangle we got right now. Including high-level missions directly on the planets has also been mentioned, and also the division of the solar system them into zones linked to the symbol we see more and more, Xenoric, Vazarin, Naraman, you know what I mean. With a user interface based on unfoldable folders, it can keep this accessible in one click side of things, and all the while still had this old shot feeling the Sims 2 one for the new version of the star map. One looking like an old parchment which unfolds like a holographic map of the solar system. Now, doesn't that sound Space Ninja? But in its aspirations and most of their executions for Warframe, DE has had a two-front approach. Rule of cool and go big or go home. And I think that if they did something like this, those two aspects would make an epic high five with a badass emote. After all, a lot of us spend quite some time in our respective ships to chit-chat on the chans, watch the trade waterfall, or speak on a separate vocal chat software. Admit it'd be way cooler to render a point of view around the moon than turning around in our ship for the 657th time, but to be completely honest, unless DE is holding back a few things on the star map like they did for the second Dream, it is unlikely that they are walking such a path. Just look where they put Europa and Ceres. And for those who might argue that doing a solar system is complicated, Nexus has been out for 12 years, so